Hey guys, welcome back to another weekly Dividend portfolio update. I thought I would do things a little different this episode, where we're going to start off the video with looking at my individual holdings, and then we'll go into each individual portfolio to see how they did overall. Just a reminder on how this Google spreadsheet works. The current price is what the stock is currently trading at, and the date to the right is the closing price on November the 5th, so it gives us exactly 1 week's performance. And then to the right of that, you can see the weekly change in percentage, and then you can also see my weekly gain or loss for that specific stock. So up first, we have Canadian Tire, ticker CTC.A, who's down about 1.75% this week. We then have Algonquin Power and Utilities, ticker AQN, who's up about 0.25% this week. We then had Brookfield Asset Management, ticker BAM.A, who's down just over 1%. We then have CIBC, ticker CM, who's just up below 1% this week. Then Canadian Natural Resources, ticker CNQ, who's down just over 4% this week, so pretty bad week for them. Then Capital Power Corp, ticker CPX, who's down about 1.25% this week. Then Canadian Utilities, ticker CU, who's down just below 1%. And Enbridge is my biggest loser this week, ticker ENB, who was down almost 6% this week alone. And because of my big position in them, I was down almost $265 this week, which really heavily impacted my Qtrade portfolio, as most of my Enbridge shares are in there, and we'll see that later on in this video. We then have Fortis, ticker FTS, who was pretty much flat this week. We then had Kiara Corp, ticker KEY, who was up just over 1.5%. We then have Manulife, ticker MFC, who is up 2.5% this week. We then have Maple Leaf Foods, ticker MFI, who is down almost 2% this week. Up next is Nutrien, ticker NTR, who is up over 2.5% this week, so they had a pretty good week. We then had Northwest Company, ticker NWC, who was up about 0.75%. Up next is Power Corp of Canada, ticker POW, who is up just below 0.5%, so not much movement. We then had Pembina Pipeline, ticker PPL, who was down almost 1.5% this week. We then had Restaurant Brands, ticker QSR, who had another bad week at almost 3%. Up next is TransAlta Renewables, ticker RNW, who also had a pretty good week, up almost 2.5%. And then we had Sienna Senior Living, ticker SIA, who also had a good week, up almost 4%. And we had Suncor, ticker SU, who was down roughly 2% this week. And then we have TELUS, ticker T, who saw not much movement, up almost 0.25%. Up next is TD Bank, ticker TD, who was up over 2% this week. And again, because I have a large position in them, I was up almost $100 with TD alone. We then have another bank stock, Bank of Nova Scotia, ticker BNS, who also had a green week, up just over 0.5%. We then had Bell, ticker BCE, who was up roughly 1% this week. And now looking at some of the REITs that I have, we have Choice Properties REIT, ticker CHP.UN, who was down about 0.5%. We then had First Capital REIT, ticker FCR.UN, who had a pretty big loss of almost 3% this week. We then had HDIB, which is a leveraged covered call ETF, who saw an increase of almost 1%. And some more REITs, we have H&R REIT, ticker HR.UN, who is down over 3%. RioCan, ticker REI.UN, who is down about 1.25%. Then we have the Smart Center REIT, ticker SRU.UN, who was pretty flat, just down about 0.2%. Then we had True North Commercial REIT, ticker TNT.UN, who was down just over 1%. And then we did have a good green stock, which was Transcontinental, who was up over 3%. We then had my other ETF, which is a REIT ETF, ticker XRE, which was down about 1.5%. And we had Brookfield Properties, ticker BEP.UN, who was down exactly 1.5%. And that brings me to my last stock, which is Converge Technology Solutions, ticker CTS, who was down almost 4% this week. So if you look at it overall, it's a pretty mixed week with a lot of green and red mixed in there. However, unfortunately, because of my bigger positions being in the red, I did have a negative week, mostly due to Enbridge, as they were down almost $265 alone in my total portfolio. Speaking of portfolios, we'll now look at my Wealthsimple Trade portfolio, where I was down roughly 1% on the week, or about $100. which brings me a total balance of $14,922.54. I then have my Qtrade portfolio, which was also down roughly 1%, or about $140. And again, this was mostly due to Enbridge. As you can see, I have almost $4,000 invested into them alone. That brings my Qtrade portfolio to $13,167.87. If we combine both portfolios together, I was down on the week about 0.6%, or $166.83, giving me a total portfolio value of $28,090.41. If you're wondering why the number is different, as I almost lost $100 in my Wealthsimple Trade portfolio and $140 in my Qtrade portfolio, the reason behind this is that the Wealthsimple Trade portfolio does not show accurately 1 week's performance, as it shows you the opening price from Monday versus the closing price on Friday, instead of showing the closing price of last Friday versus the closing price of this Friday. Therefore, any gains that are made over the weekend, which essentially means that the opening price on the Monday is higher than the closing price on the Friday, are not looked at when looking at the Wealthsimple Trade weekly performance. If we take a look at the S&P 500 this week, we can see that it was down 0.4%, so pretty similar to my portfolio. And then if we look at the S&P TSX performance this week, surprisingly it was actually up and over 1% this week, so pretty different compared to my portfolio and the S&P 500. Getting to the dividend that I received this week, it won't take much time as I only had one dividend, which was from my leveraged covered call ETF, ticker HDIV, who gave me 82 cents. And that brings my total dividends for the month of November to $50.24. I did not add any new contributions to my portfolios this week. However, I still have about $200 in cash between both my Wealthsimple Trade and Qtrade portfolio, so I will look to add to some of my existing positions in the near future. But please let me know in the comments below, are there any good deals that you currently see? As an example, Enbridge was down 6% this week, so this might be a great opportunity to buy them, but let me know what you think and what stocks you're keeping an eye out for.